Hey, Jay Daughtry, welcome to this new thing we're doing called Association Conversation. Glad to have you here, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's give this a second for people to join in. I know it takes a second for people to sign in here. While we do, I'd like to explain what it is we're doing. The association conversations, this new concept. I actually was working with somebody and preparing a webinar. We're going old school webinar slides, and this is actually Lowell Applebaum. And I went to Lowell. I was like, okay, Lowell, I got all the slides ready. And he's like, Dave, I don't want to do slides. In fact, he did a whole presentation, Jay, at ASA Annual, specifically about how he hated PowerPoint slide decks. And then I come in, I'm like, all right, Lowell, let's do it, man. Let's do it. So ultimately, what we decided is we're just going to do a video chat like this. And it was awesome. It was so much fun. It was low pressure. And so we're going to be doing this regularly now. And in fact, we're going to evergreen these as podcasts as well. So we're doing this live. But if you're listening to this as a podcast, we're going to be getting all the comments and chat from people listening to this live. If you are listening to this live, by all means, feel free to jump in the chat and comment and tell us, in fact, introduce yourself. Tell us who's here. We're going to incorporate your comments into our conversation. But really what we're doing here is we're recording a podcast and we're doing it live with an audience. So Jay, I'm psyched to have you here, man. I've known you quite some time, and why don't you introduce yourself? Tell the audience who you are.
Sure. So I'm Jay Daughtry, and I'm actually a former educator. I have a master's degree in educational administration, but I've been on the business side of things for about 22 years now, and I've been working primarily with associations since 2002. So I've worked for companies like Wells Fargo, ISG Solutions, Personify, Results Direct, and I've been on my own as a consultant for the past 2.5 years. And mostly I've been working with associations and technology companies in the space around communications. But one of the things that I really love doing and I'm focusing on now has to do with member testimonials, member reviews, member success stories. And that's becoming a real passion for me, telling those stories.
Well, that's what drew us into this conversation today.
Exactly.
I think we had a conversation once again at ASA not too long ago, and this came up, and I thought we gotta figure out a story here to talk about with people. I'm Dave Will. Some people know me through my previous venture, Peach New Media. I still have all my pads and all my pens from Peach New Media. Currently owned by it's Freestone Learning Management System. Currently owned by Community Brands. Subsequently, about 2.5 years ago, I started a company called Prop Fuel. Prop Fuel is designed now it took us a little while to get back to associations, but Prop Fuel is designed to capture the voice of the member. It's designed as a way to on a continuous basis, drive feedback by targeting very specific groups of people with questions over a long period of time. Kind of drip marketing with questions. So that's a little of my background. And Jay, once again, thanks for being here today. So today's topic, we're talking about using feedback to capture the member story. And we're going to cover the 3 elements of that: how to capture the voice of the member, how to curate the story, and how to capitalize on that curation. And once again, if you're listening to this live, feel free to jump in the chat, add your comments, add your questions, and we will respond to those as we go through this conversation. So that's the topic, using feedback to capture the member story. Let's start here, Jay. It's September 11th. This is not a coincidence. We chose to do this broadcast today because of the significance of the date to us. Now, you found a story by the Feel Good Foundation. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to show us and what we're going to listen to right now.
Right. So again, when we decided on this date, we wanted to tie in a little bit of something about September 11th. And really, I think where the story resonated with me had to do with the support we as a nation give those first responders and where they are. And so I came across the Feel Good Foundation, And I want to play a video for you from that foundation. It really focuses a lot on the founder, John Field, and some of the work that he's been doing, and some of the message that they get out and how they're supporting those first responders. So again, not to commercialize in any way 9/11, but in a respectful way, hopefully take a look at the story. It's about a 4-minute video. I will play it in its entirety, but I might stop it once or twice just to make a couple of comments about it. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and start it.
While you're doing that, if you're listening to the podcast, you're going to hear the audio, and the audio is just as good as the video.
I'm a resident of Lower Manhattan, about a mile from Ground Zero, and I actually watched the towers collapse.
You could not see. The fires were burning. It was pure chaos.
It's like the gates of hell just opened up.
There was a tremendous amount of toxins in that environment.
You know, one toxin over time will give you cancer, but 2,500 different chemicals mixed together, we were lab rats.
And the way that these toxins act is they don't act necessarily immediately.
A lot of friends of mine were getting sick, and we weren't really being taken care of, and we weren't really being taken serious. Kenny Speck, my friend, says to me, "Hey, Ray, you got to check this guy out, John Field."
What is it that you need from us? What can we do?
John Field was introduced to us early on, and it was really one of the high points for me in my medical career.
Yeah, a lot of people call me a first responder too, but I wound up correcting them. I responded to 9/11, but 9/17 is the day I got hurt. All the benefits that I paid into, why am I having to fight for workman's comp? And meanwhile, I'm losing everything. But the whole process started. I started helping others. And then, you know, one thing led to another. Like, well, start a foundation. And I was like, what? How do you spell foundation, you know?
Okay, I just want to pause it there really quickly. I think there's a few things going on here that I really love with the story and the way they've presented it. One is they do use the statistics that are there about how more people will die from 9/11 related illnesses than actually perished on that day 18 years ago. That's a powerful statistic, but they don't leave it there. They go on and tell stories. My feeling a lot of times is associations are laden with a lot of statistics, but they don't do enough to capitalize on the stories behind those statistics to bring individuals to the forefront. So there's that aspect of it. I like this sense of the people that are down, that they feel like they've been kicked around, and here's somebody that's uniting them. Here's somebody who's bringing their story to the front to try to get additional assistance for them. And again, John Field presents himself as a everyday man, if you will. You know, just even that comment about, you know, start a foundation. How do you spell foundation? You know, he's probably exaggerating to a certain extent. But there's certainly a sense that these are people that are everyday people out there trying to do a job to protect us, to bring us safety, and really appreciate that. So we'll go on with the video.
Jay, wait, there's one thing I want to add. Something the Feel Good Foundation is doing here is what a lot of you guys are doing in your associations as well, which is you're educating the market. Everybody knows there were victims, and everybody knows there were first responders that risked their lives, and some died on 9/11, 2001. What many of us did not know is that there's still victims from the output and the chemicals associated with that are still suffering today. And so not only is this a good story to remind us and to demonstrate and exemplify what they stand for, but this is an educational story to teach us a little bit more about the things we didn't know about the scenario.
Exactly. And another thing that comes to my mind too, Dave, is that, you know, most of the people that are participating with us in this video chat today are member organizations, whether their members are, you know, professionals, individuals, or they're trade organizations, and they've got companies or organizations as members. The Feel Good Foundation doesn't have members per se, but they have a constituency, people that they serve. And I think that's part of the message we want to get across today is who are you messaging in a broader sense? For most membership organizations, we realize that it needs to go beyond that membership base of 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever that number is. How do you get that message out to a larger audience? So that's part of it as well. We'll go back to the video here.
We were watching with horror as the Congress was about to go on a holiday break and not deal with this Health and Compensation Act, called as the Droga Bill. And so we reached out to John to try and get him on the show because we'd heard about his lobbying efforts.
When we went down to D.C., we were just a bunch of blue-collar workers going down and guerrilla lobbying.
You know, this is a government-run agency, this bill. The healthcare and the compensation. And like any government-run agency, people fall through the cracks. So those people still need our help.
It's each time, it's over. We help them, you know, everything is in place, but it's never over.
It took until the bill to get passed this year to realize that I do have a life outside of this.
Every free moment he has is making a call to a senator or a congressman.
Well, she's about to get schooled by John Field.
And now that the bill is passed, he dedicates almost all of his time to getting people enrolled in the health program.
Ronnie, I'm home. Most Americans don't think they have the right to go to Washington, D.C. because they don't think it's legal. They don't think that they're going to get anywhere. They don't think that it's going to make a difference.
I think that if we had people in power who could make decisions like John Field, I think it'd be a very great thing for this country because he really cares about people.
How are you now? I'm a 9/11 responder talking to 9/11 responders. Whatever they think they're going through or about to go through or what they haven't gone through yet, I've done it. I've been there. And if I haven't, I've heard the story.
They went from being heroes to being victims. And what John Field did is that he said, you are heroes, and the world needs to recognize what your condition is.
We're starting to...
I'm going to stop it there again. Just a couple of observations. One, again, they're really driving home this point that these are everyday people down on their luck, need additional assistance, and how John Field's bringing them together. Again, a couple of testimonies speak directly to his efforts, the kind of relentless guy that he is, that sort of thing. And this message that, you know, heroes who became victims, and we need to remind people that they are heroes. I love that kind of sentiment, that kind of message that gets across. And I did want to point out as well, you know, the appearance of Jon Stewart here. For those of you who don't know, he has a TV show, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and he is basically a comedian. He's an influencer. And it adds credibility to this, even though his specialty is not necessarily first responders or, you know, fire or police work, anything like that. But he does have a voice. They're really capitalizing on that here. And each of your associations has people that can speak for the industry. They may not be famous. They may not be well known by 2 million people or 10 million people, but they may only need to be known or, you know, revered by 5,000 or 8,000. And so identifying who those people are who can have a voice for your organization.
Hey, Jay, you used the word just a minute ago, sentiment. And I think that's a really important word here because we all know, or I think we know, people buy with emotion, right? And when they're renewing their membership, they're buying something. They're buying a membership. And if you're selling them a membership with statistics and credentials, it's a little tougher sell than if they're emotionally connected with the organization. And so things like this video, there's a lot of sentiment. There's a lot of emotion associated with it. And something we're going to talk about a little bit later is, sure, first responders, when you have missions and healthcare, it's easy to find stories that have high emotion, lots of sentiment. Question is, how do you do that in accounting? How do you do that in law? And so that's something we'll talk about a little bit later, Jay.
Exactly. Okay, so just about 40 seconds left in this video. We'll finish it now.
To bring about knowledge to the people in this country about the plight of the 9/11 responders and what they're going through.
We're all in this together, and we're going to stay here together until we finish this.
And he's the voice of the first responders. That without him, a lot of stuff wouldn't have got accomplished.
There is a life outside of this for me. It's just I'm not ready to let go because I know there's still more work to do.
I just love how raw that is. Like, I love how the the accents are thick. Nobody's dressed in their Sunday best. It's just, I mean, it's very well edited. So what do you think makes a good video, Jay? What makes a good story for an association? You made a lot of comments in there. What else can you tell me about a good story?
So I think one of the things that we want to think about a lot is, when we go to a movie, right? What do we expect to happen in that movie? What do we go to a movie for, right? We're not
let me actually, I know that was rhetorical. I'm going to try to answer that though, because I want to see what you think about this. Number one, you want some emotion, right? You want to connect with the characters. You want to feel something. Number two, you need a villain, right? You need and I think every good story needs a villain. And number three, I think maybe the contrary to the villain, you need the hero. Is that something, am I touching on something important here? Can we apply those things to associations and how they tell stories?
I think you absolutely can. I think it's a sense of emotion. It's a sense of overcoming obstacles. There's a sense that you want to be inspired, perhaps. I mean, think about, obviously we have a lot of Marvel superhero movies, which fit exactly sort of the description you just talked about. But then there are stories of the little guy overcoming incredible odds to make it somewhere, right? Maybe it's the sports movies. A lot of sports movies are based on that, right? Nobody gives them a chance. They've got a coach who brings them together. They may not have enough equipment, all that kind of thing, right? I'm convinced that every association has people, has members, constituents that have these stories. And it might be directly related to the industry. It might be indirectly related to the industry. But how do you spotlight members who have something to tell? That's the big part of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, that's a good segue, I think, to the next section we want to talk about is how do you capture the voice of the member? And I think this is where I'm going to step in and offer a few comments. Most of us in the association space are using an AMS. And an AMS, association management software, will track transactional data. Some AMSs or other tools will track behavioral data. So when you send an email, marketing automation email, what are they clicking on? Which tells us what's important to them, who's engaging, and so on. So we're seeing that transactional behavioral data. What most associations are not as good at tracking is the psychographic data, which, to go back to a word you used, is a sentiment. It has a lot to do with what is it that our members are feeling about the association. And so one of the key elements to that is, instead of sending out surveys every year, like I hear all the time about member satisfaction survey, the intent there is to capture sentiment. Problem is we're doing it once a year and we're doing one big blast to everybody. The better way to capture feedback, and that leads to the feedback you need to tell a good story, one way to capture that feedback is to target very specific groups of people with a very specific set of questions over a period of time along the life cycle of their membership journey. So you might start with new members, and you'd have a new member feedback campaign where every month or periodically over the course of the first year, you ask him one question. And you're sparking many times over the course of the year, you're sparking the voice of the member. And so that's kind of the way we've designed Prop Fuel, as much like a marketing automation platform, to capture feedback over a period of time. So here's a good example, and I'm going to show another video. But what I want you to kind of think about here, this is a video from put on by Spartan Races, if you're familiar with. So it's not really association, but it is very similar to a member-based organization. They have thousands and thousands of athletes that subscribe to a race, and ideally we need them resubscribing. to the races. We need them signing up for more races down the road. And so what Joe DeSena, he's the founder and a friend of mine. Joe DeSena is the founder of Spartan Races. And he went to, I think, one of his races beforehand with a camera and started asking people to tell him their story. So what's interesting is it looks like it's by happenstance. It looks like he's just kind of tapping somebody in the shoulder. But I think if you dig deeper, my guess is he did some research. So I'm going to share that with you right now. Give me a second while I pull this up. And again, if you're listening on the podcast, that's okay. You're going to be able to hear all of this, and it's just as relevant. So here we go with Joe DeSena from Spartan Races.
Joe Spartan here, founder of Spartan Race. Today, over 6 million people have gone through this. Spartans come in all shapes and sizes. But behind every Spartan, there's a story.
Spartan saved my life.
You've seen the obstacles, but today at Citi Field, we are going to find the heart of a Spartan.
My name is Dave Kane. I'm 43 years old. I'm a firefighter in York, Pennsylvania. I started firefighting when I was 14 years old. So all those times, you just see the faces of the people that you couldn't save along the way, and it mounts up over time.
And I want to hear your story. What do you got going on?
I'm a firefighter.
Firefighter. Thank you.
Also a U.S. Army veteran. I've struggled with post-traumatic stress, but then when I found Spartan, I was scared to death. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But as soon as I hit that course, I was like, yes.
How has it changed your life specifically? How has Spartan changed your life?
I was going through a tough time with suicidal thoughts. Things that got me through that were my family, thinking of my kids and my wife. The fact that I had races coming up. So I had to come here and race.
Gotta get it done.
If I went through with my thoughts, I couldn't race anymore.
I want you to know, my email, you are officially signed up for every race for the next 20 years.
For real?
Yeah, for real. All right? So
sign me up for every race?
Every race, any race you want to do.
All right, and I think we can stop it there. You get the point here. Is we're about half done with this video. But Jay, I'm curious, what do you think? Did Joe, I haven't asked him. I'm going to have to ask him. I should have asked him before this. So we knew the answer, actually, I don't know what I was thinking. But did Joe, was he aware of these stories before going to this event they were at? Or do you think he was just tapping people on the shoulder saying, hey, can I get your story?
So I think it's possible that it just happened that way, but my guess is there's a lot of work that went into that, right? They probably did something to gather maybe 20, 30, 40 stories. I don't know. And then they dug deeper on maybe 10 or 12 of them. And then they dug deeper, I think they found this guy. They found a guy who had a good story to tell. And one of the things I compare this to is if anybody's watched Undercover Boss, right? Let's say the company has 20,000 employees. They just happen to find the 3 or 4 best stories, of somebody whose child is sick, somebody who's about to lose their house, somebody who can't afford their college tuition, whatever it is. And then the owner comes in and blesses them and gifts them with things that help them on this journey. Those don't happen by accident. There's a lot of research that goes into that. But the trick is for your organization making it look effortless, right?
So, Jay, I'm smirking because if he did, if he really did just go there with a camera hoping to get a good story like that, that's way more work than necessary and way higher stress. I think oftentimes I see a lot of associations, though, they do that. They respond and capture feedback in general by happenstance. When people, they react to people complaining, or they bump into somebody at a conference, or they pull together a group of members in a quote unquote focus group and they'll ask them questions, which is great. But it's by happenstance. Mm-hmm. There's one of our customers, NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association. His name's Scott Douglas. He spoke at ASAE in Columbus about this in particular. where he uses this our feedback platform, PropFuel, to identify in his membership who he needs to pick up the phone and talk to. He's got 30,000 members. He sends out tons of questions on a regular basis. Not tons of questions. I take that back. It's like monthly questions out to his membership. 1 or 2 questions per check-in. But their responses take the chance out of it. They take the happenstance out of it. So now he can scan through the sentiment analysis and figure out, okay, I've got to reach out to these 5 people. I think I can turn them from detractors into promoters. So let's go back to Joe. The way Joe could have done this is the same thing by asking a certain set of questions over a period of time. He could have, like you said, have identified 30 or 40 potential stories. They do this for the Iron Man too. If you've ever seen the Iron Man on TV, they have phenomenal stories. They always make me cry. It's funny. I could watch some horrible show on, some ridiculously sad, disturbing movie, and it won't choke me up. But then I watch the Iron Man. I see one of these stories about the paraplegic who finishes the Iron Man, and like I'm just bawling in tears watching this thing. So the point is with that, and Joe's doing the same thing, it gets you emotional. All right, so it's easy to do with the Ironman and with Joe's Spartan races. It's easy to do with first responders. It's easy to do with, I might even go so far to say in law, you can start talking about major issues like human trafficking, that make it highly emotional and we can connect with on a personal level. But dude, what do you do with accounting? There's certain fields out there, forgive me to the accountants out there, but there's certain fields out there that, how the heck do you make this? How do you get people to connect with a story about accounting?
Yeah. So before I answer that specific question, another thing I want to point out with what Joe DeCina just did is he made something that's buzzworthy, right? I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit more on the show a little bit later on, but there's this sense of it doesn't cost them that much to give you free entry to races, right? What's another person added to that, to thousands of people who are there? So again, I think associations are great for this because, I mean, what if you gave somebody the next 20 years, you get to come to our annual
awesome lifetime membership. That's fantastic. I love that. So I love that. Now you go broadcast that, and it's just all around a feel good.
In fact, you do that. I don't know how Joe does this because I'm not very familiar with Spartan, but I mean, he could do that at every race, find the best story, right? Give them, it wouldn't have to always be 20 years. You could give them a year or 5 years or whatever. But I mean, think about the impact and the word that gets around about that kind of thing. People want to affiliate with that. And so to go to your question about accountants, again, I think there are stories.
I'm sorry, hang on. And you notice, I didn't actually say this, but if you were watching, I pulled that up on Instagram. So that was an Instagram post. And so we'll talk in a minute about capitalizing on the story. So we'll go back to that in a second. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So I think with accountants, sort of like I alluded to earlier, is one, there are accountants out there who overcame great odds to become accountants. Maybe it was a learning disability. Maybe it was a financial status. Maybe it was, they're the first person in their family to even go to college. There are lots of stories like that. I think beyond that, I think what we want are people who are relatable. Okay. So for example, I'm a baseball fan, and maybe you've got an accountant who volunteers as a little league baseball coach. And they wound up coaching the all-star team, and they wound up winning the state, or they won the region, whatever it might be, right? There are ways that people are involved in other people's lives that you want the rest of your members, the rest of your constituents to identify with, right?
So making an association that is seemingly purely about content and getting better at your trade and humanizing it. Yeah, I think that's what you're referring to. That's excellent.
And I don't think it always has to be exactly about the profession or the trade. Tell a good story, right? Again, if I'm sitting in a good movie that lasts an hour and 45 minutes, I'm not constantly looking at my watch to think, when is this going to be over so I can do something else, right? You're engrossed in the story. That's what you want. You want people to be engrossed in your story. And if along the way you motivate, you educate, you inspire, then great.
All right, so let's talk about, let's see, we've got curating the content. Let's talk about the process, because I think we can incorporate the curation of the content into the process. What is the process? What are the, at the high level, what does an association need to do to create a story or a series of stories like this?
Okay. So first of all, you have to have your ears open for the stories, right? And
feedback. Capture that feedback, collect the stories. Right. Okay.
And you've just touched on that some and the ways that does happen. But it could still happen through conferences. It could still happen through seminars. It shouldn't just be your staff listening for those stories. Maybe there are volunteer leaders who are out there listening for those stories.
Oh, can I let me
ahead.
jump in right there? You just touched on something fascinating to me, your staff. So oftentimes you might have the membership person or the communications, the marketing person responsible for this. So what are they going to do? Typically, they're going to go straight to the membership, right? Let's just say they're doing it the right way, and they're going to reach out to the membership by asking questions with technology and capturing feedback that way. But you nailed something just now that we didn't comment on, and that is asking your staff. Your staff is interacting with the members all the time. Mm-hmm. So not only do we need to send questions out to membership, we need to send questions to your staff. We need to engage the staff in that dialogue.
Yeah. And again, there are two things I love about associations among many things, but one is that generally people who work in associations are member-centric. They're driven to provide customer service, member service, right? They're out there, as you said, interacting with people. And that's a tremendous asset to leverage, if you will. The other thing is that because associations typically, I'll just make up an example. Let's say your association has 25 staff members, but they're working with 12,000 members, right? There's incredible leverage there in terms of the visibility in the space. Your staff may not know really much at all about a given industry that your association represents, but they become experts simply by working at the association. And a lot of times they have a lot more respect and they have a lot more attention than, the average person would within that space. So.
All right, so we've got keep taking me through this process. We've identified the story.
Yes. So I think part of it too is like I alluded to with maybe the way it happened with Joe DeCina. I think you want to find multiple stories. You don't want to just settle on the first story, right? I don't know how much people on the call today have heard about this kind of thing, but if you look at newspaper editors, or you look at creating a subject line for an email, right? A lot of times they say your subject line or your headline or your whatever it is that's capturing that topic is going to be better if you've come up with 15 or 20 alternatives, right? And again, we're talking about making something look effortless, right? But sometimes that effortless look took a lot of work behind it. And my parallel here is you find a story, you're like, wow, this is the story. We've got to tell this story. But have you dug deeper to find if there's 5 or 6 or 10 other stories? Maybe there's a better one than this one. Maybe there's a better one than this one for now or for the next 3 weeks or whatever it might be, right? So you want to have this ammunition that you can pull out and you can use across time. And I think I don't want to get too much down that track because I think that's part of what we're going to touch base on later, but it's understanding when to use that information or that story.
So at some point, I'm assuming in most cases, we're turning this into a video because those are the two examples we saw. Naturally, I guess you could make a case study. You could probably put something on your website, like a testimonial on the website, but really the most impactful thing is what we've seen, which are videos. Isn't that kind of expensive? I mean, how do you go about creating it? Do you just outsource it to a firm and expect to pay 20 grand? I mean, what do you budget and how do you get this done? And is there a way to do it on the cheap?
Yeah. So I think the simple answer is there's a way to do it on the cheap. I mean, there are more and more things that you can do, even by using your own smartphone, right? I mean, capturing videos. And again, to your point, I think we saw this in the first responders video. We saw it to a certain extent in Joe DeCina's video. It doesn't have to be all perfect and polished for it to resonate with people, for it to get across the message that you want it to have. Now, obviously, the first responders, they had a video production company come in and do it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I thought that one was highly produced. Joe DeCina's, though, that's something I think my guess is an intern could probably put together. You know, you could even do that with a smartphone, interviewing people. You get a few clips that you insert here and there, a few words here and there. I think there's basic video production tools you can use to do that on the cheap. I mean, what a great summer project for an intern. I mean it. That's fantastic. In fact, this isn't just for associations. This has got me thinking about Prop Fuel and how we can incorporate stories into educating people on a better way to capture feedback. I mean, this is awesome.
Yes. Good. All
right. Let's wrap this with a conversation about capitalizing on the story. Obviously, we see Joe puts us in Instagram. The first responders, I don't know where the video is just on YouTube, but let's talk about capitalizing. How do you get, once you have this great piece of art, you know, this story, whether it's 3 minutes, 90 seconds, well, actually, that's another interesting question, is like, what's the right length?
Yes.
But then, okay, let's answer the length question, but then how do you capitalize on it?
Yeah. So I think the length question really depends on your audience and the kind of information you're conveying. But generally, we're talking about creating shorter videos. I mean, I think both of the videos that we showed today, and we didn't show both of them in their entireties, but they were less than 4 minutes each, right? So the point is, you're not creating this mini movie that's 20 minutes long. Get something out there. And honestly, I think it would be better to, if you've got, let's say you've got 20 minutes of content, it might be better to create a series that's 5 videos that are 4 minutes each, right? And then you've got reasons for people to come back to your website, to your YouTube channel, to your Instagram feed, whatever it might be. You're engaging them over the course of the long haul. You referenced sort of that drip marketing, right? But how do you engage people and get them to keep coming back?
You know, we're all talking about social media and content. That's been a conversation for way too long, actually. But this, generally, content is what drives social media. And so this is just one form of content. I've been reading and continuing to read about how important video is in communicating with our constituents now, whoever they may be. And I really like the concept of the series, the story. We're turning this, what we're doing right now, into a podcast, which is another possibility, these audio clips. But what if you were to take these videos and incorporate them into your new member onboarding process? Or what if you were to take these videos and incorporate them into the lapsed member feedback process? A last-ditch chance at getting people to actually feel something again for the association. So, listen, I think we're pretty close to wrapping here. Is there anything else you want to comment on? I have a couple comments I'd like to make before we wrap this up. But anything you want to say?
Yeah.
Anything that we didn't touch on that you think we should add to the table here?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. One is that I was thinking about what we were talking about earlier about sentiment or about emotion. And one of the examples that came to my mind are car commercials. Okay. So cars are not sold because they have 4 tires and a steering wheel and leather seats, right? They're sold based on how you identify
that's such a great point.
Right?
Such a great point.
And so, you know, and I could probably start saying keywords, and most of you would think of a brand name to go with that, right? Like if I said adventure or I said luxury, you know, whatever it might be, there's a connection, there's an emotion.
Connection,
so,
yeah.
Right. And that's where it comes back to the question of how do you tell a story about an accountant, right? I think you've got to find that way to connect with the audience and tell the story.
I might argue that it's the associations where it's seemingly difficult to make a connection where there's the greatest opportunity. Because it's the associations that already have an easy connection. That's why people joined. There's a connection. You can't make that connection stronger. But when you're looking at accountants or elevator contractors or something else, if you can create a connection that didn't exist before, oh my gosh, what a great opportunity.
I think you're exactly right. There's a lot to that. And you've got a great principle there that there may be greater opportunities because essentially it's probably been underserved. So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to touch on really quickly is this sense of timing, right? I referenced earlier, like you find that one story, but maybe it's not the best story for right now, right? And there's probably lots of examples I could give, but sometimes you just know, again, going back to the fact that this is 9/11, we've touched on first responders, we've touched on a man who's a firefighter in York, PA. But there are certain stories that are going to be better based on the time of year, the season of year. And again, it could relate to athletics. It could relate to holidays. You want to have these things in reserve, right? You want to know that you can go to a bank of stories and develop them further. So,
bank of stories. That's a great phrase, a bank of stories. Yeah.
But yeah, you got to start somewhere, right? Like you might have 0 stories today, but start building that up. But yeah, you've got deposits, right? But every once in a while you want to pull them out, but you want to keep it replenished as well.
So Maurice, I hope I said your name right, Maurice, asked the question, can you share more tips about identifying members to share stories? Do you have examples of the questions to ask members to see who may have a story to share? I think that's something we can think on certainly more if you want to connect offline. I would love to talk to you about that. So I'll answer that. And then Jay, think about how you want to answer that as well. But let me start because Prop Fuel is the whole purpose of creating a platform like Prop Fuel for us was giving a voice to the members in a world where the voice, individual's voice has become so commonplace. It's amazing how many associations still don't give their members a voice. They're constantly talking at their members, but not giving them a chance to talk to the association leadership. There's no listening. There's a lot of talking on the association side. And just look at the number of emails we send out in the association world. It's outrageous. It's all content. Okay, enough bashing the communication style. Certainly don't mean to do that. To answer your question, Prop Fuel, we've got a whole bank, hundreds of questions to pick from. Many of them will draw out this concept of a story. Some of the questions you can ask are as direct as, especially if you're going after a specific story and you're targeting a very specific group of people, you can start with silly questions like, why'd you join? Or is there something, what led you to become an accountant? What took you down the journey to joining the First Responders Association? Of course, depending on your association, there's going to be different variations of the questions, but digging a little into the background, I think the important thing here is we're asking questions that drive sentiment. To go back to your word, Jay, oftentimes we're asking questions about things we ought to know already, which is what's important to you in your membership. Like we ought to know that already about our members based on a lot of the historical information. What we don't know oftentimes, and along with the transactional stuff, we know that. If you have to ask what age group you're in, you don't have a great database of your membership. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen a couple times. So the transactional and the behavioral data, it's there. We want to focus on the psychographic data. So you're going to ask questions that are drawing out sentiment. And I can give you tons of examples of those offline, of course.
Yeah, so let me chime in and add a couple of thoughts there. On more of a guerrilla warfare kind of standpoint, I think you can start to ask your leadership about stories that they know of. I think one thing that would be effective is asking people who's a fellow member that you really admire, somebody that's really impressed you. And one of the things I find, and here's an example, is that let's say, for example, I'm planning to take my wife out for dinner for our anniversary. And I ask a few friends, where should I take her for dinner? Well, obviously I'm going to get suggestions that I don't really like. I don't care for. Maybe I've been there last week. I don't want to do it, right? But there might be this theme that emerges where 2 or 3 people name the same place. Maybe it's a place I've never been to. Maybe I've driven by it. I've thought about it. And now it's like, wow, now is the time. So my point is that you start to hear different people say, you should talk to Dave Will, right? And you hear 2 or 3 people say that, and they're like, I don't know why, but let's talk to him. And then the story starts to emerge, okay? And I think, just a quick insert here about the other kinds of stories that are out there. I love stories that, this is just one example, but there might be some generational aspect to it, right? Like maybe my grandfather was a dentist and now I'm a dentist. Maybe my grandfather was a member of the state dental society in Indiana, but now I live in Virginia, but I'm carrying on that legacy, if you will, right? Like things like that. I think there are all kinds of stories out there. You just have to listen to them and see what can we develop further? What do we need more details around?
I'm looking through our bank of questions right now, and I think we can certainly ask, hey, what's your story? You could go as direct to that, or you can work around the fringe. You could say, why do you believe we're here as an association? Get them just get them putting words out in front of you. Why did you become a member? What would drive you to leave? Where do you feel you could help shape the direction of our association? Like these kinds of questions are on the fringe and will start to identify the passions of your members.
Exactly.
All right, Jay, something I wanted to comment on. I think for me, there's 3 takeaways. One is we need to create stories. If you're not creating a story, you're not taking advantage of a really effective way to communicate your value proposition. Number 2, you need Prop Fuel to help you capture that. You need to, and we just love working with associations. That's our number 1 focus right now. So we'll help you find these stories. And number 3, you need Jay to help you get through this journey of facilitating the dialogue all the way through the production and curation and the capitalization of that video. So Jay, how can people reach you if they want to learn more about this, continue the conversation with you?
Sure. So my phone number is 703-430-6411, or if you prefer, you may email me at jay@cqbd.org. We say C cubed, but it's jay@cqbd.org. My website is cqbd.org.
Excellent. I'm Dave Will, PropFuel, www.propfuel.com, dave@propfuel.com. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been really fun. I was excited, Jay, about this conversation because
I was too.
To me, the concept of taking a story and instead of the data and the statistics, taking a member story and using that to drive the value proposition. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today, Jay.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.